Shows like Gypsy Sisters and My Big Fat American Gypsy Wedding give us an insight into Gypsy culture, and what we see of women's lives can be shocking. Interviews with the women also shed light on the strict rules their culture expects them to follow. Keep watching to discover the fascinating rules and suspicions surrounding childbirth. To see more videos like this on TheTalko, hit the subscribe button. Now let's get started with 20 strict rules women must follow in Gypsy culture. Don't expect an education. A lot of children in the Gypsy culture, both boys and girls, don't complete their education. In fact, a 2011 study in the UK found that 60% of the traveling community had no formal qualifications. Illiteracy rates are shockingly high, but it's particularly the girls that don't get to stay at school once they reach puberty. One of the main reasons for girls being taken out of school so young is so that they don't meet boys from outside the Gypsy community. Of course, there are many exceptions to this rule. There are Gypsy families that do send their girls to school all the way through their education, and attitudes towards educating women are slowly changing within the community. Marry within your culture. As we've seen, girls in Gypsy culture aren't generally allowed to find love with a boy from outside the community. It's important for the Gypsy community to keep unions within the culture. So that means you have to marry another Gypsy, not a gorger. A gorger is somebody who doesn't belong to the Gypsy, Romani, or traveler community. This desire to keep everything within the community can mean that marriages between second cousins aren't uncommon. As for the age of Gypsy brides, it's typical for girls to wed when they are 16 or 17. For boys, the typical age is slightly older at 18 or 19. Always obey your parents. Growing up in the Gypsy community, girls have strict rules to follow, and who lays down those rules? Their parents. Of course, this is not that different to a lot of cultures, but the role of the parents, and particularly the father, is of paramount importance in the Gypsy community. You definitely do what you're told, and when Gypsy girls are growing up, they are only allowed to go out if other family members accompany them. They are closely protected and aren't given much freedom at all. Boys are treated differently to girls, and the expectations for each gender are different. Some might call that double standards. Let your parents choose your husband. Before a Gypsy woman marries, her parents are in charge, and then when she's got married, her husband is in charge. And the parents can have a big say in that too. Part of obeying your parents in certain parts of the Gypsy community involves letting them pick out your husband. In some families, the parents choose their daughters' husbands on their behalves. Arranged marriages still exist in some Gypsy communities, and even when that isn't the case, it's commonplace for Gypsy girls to get married young, well before they turn 20. Let the man make the first move. If a Gypsy girl lives on a site where her parents don't choose her husband for her, that doesn't mean she can be proactive about it. It isn't the norm for girls to approach boys. In fact, many Gypsy families lay down strict rules that forbid their daughters from approaching boys. And the way that Gypsy boys go about approaching girls is somewhat shocking. TV shows like My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding showed the world the courtship ritual called grabbing. This is when a boy literally grabs a girl he wants to kiss. It can seem violent to onlookers, but in some parts of the culture, it is considered the norm. Don't date. There is certain dating etiquette in Gypsy culture that lays down the rules for how young girls and boys can behave towards each other, and it involves chaperones. Basically, there isn't much of a dating scene in many Gypsy communities. You won't find girls dating different boys. That's because young women and men who aren't married aren't allowed to socialize together alone. So no romantic dinner dates or trips to the movies, just the two of you. All of this is tied up with the importance of female chastity in the Gypsy community. Not only are Gypsy girls not allowed to date, they're also definitely not allowed to live with a man out of wedlock. Don't live in sin. Given that Gypsy girls aren't given an opportunity to spend time with different guys on their own, this next point is hardly surprising. Gypsy girls must not shack up with a guy before they marry him. That's because Gypsy communities believe in the principle of no intimacy before marriage. Some outsiders would consider rules like these to be very old-fashioned. It seems as if feminism hasn't happened in Gypsy cultures that still observe these rules. Of course, men won't be living in sin either, given that the women aren't allowed to. But it's much more shameful for a woman to display such behavior. Save yourself for marriage. Gypsy girls are expected to be virgins until their wedding day. This can be somewhat surprising given the provocative clothes they're encouraged to wear, but the way they're told to present themselves and the way they're told to behave are very much at odds. You definitely must save yourself for your husband on your wedding night. What would happen to a Gypsy girl who broke this rule? She would be considered dirty and defiled by her community. By behaving in that way, she would risk being left on the shelf. No man in the Gypsy culture would be willing to go against the code of conduct and marry her after she had been with another man. Obey your husband. As a wife, you are pretty much owned by your husband. The man rules the roost in Gypsy culture. In fact, in many Gypsy couples, the man does not let his wife go out with her friends. She has to stay at home, look after the kids, and do the cleaning. An Irish traveler woman called Kathleen explained to the UK's Guardian newspaper that that was the reason why so many Gypsy women are keen to live on sites. It gives the women company. They might not be allowed to go off site with other women, but they can spend time with them in each other's homes while the men are out working. Don't expect to be in charge. We've already seen how men are very much in charge in the Gypsy culture. This is part of the Roma tradition of hierarchy. Several extended families live together on sites these days. Historically, and still in some communities, bands of families travel together in caravans. These bands are each led by a voivode who is elected for life. You can think of this particular person as the chieftain, and the chief of a group of Gypsy families will always be a man, not a woman. There is hierarchy amongst the women too, though. A senior woman in the group is traditionally called a furry dai. It's her job to look after the welfare of the band's women and children. Marriages for life. As a Gypsy woman, once you're married, you can forget about getting divorced. As female chastity and the role of woman as wife is so important in Gypsy culture, second marriages after divorces are not common. This is because the woman would be considered defiled. She should only be with her husband, and marriage is for life. On the rare occasions where women do leave their husbands, they're unlikely to have another relationship. It would not only affect the way the community viewed her, but also her daughters. Kathleen told the Guardian newspaper in the UK that if she was to get involved with another man following her separation, it would bring shame on her daughters, and they would never be married because of that. Put up with abuse. The rate of domestic abuse in the Gypsy community is shockingly high. A study in the UK found that 61% of married English Gypsy women and 81% of Irish travelers had experienced domestic abuse, and women are often expected to put up with it. In the USA, one of the stars of the TLC show Gypsy Sisters spoke out about the abuse she suffered. Mally Stanley's ex-husband Danny locked her in their trailer and gave her a severe beating when she escaped. Her family members convinced her to take him back. Melly explained the reason why, saying, "That was the Gypsy tradition. You have to stick it out." When her second husband beat her in her sleep because he wanted her to terminate a pregnancy, Melly didn't press charges against him. She explained, "Gypsies don't believe in that." Don't call the police. It's not just domestic abuse that goes unreported in the Gypsy community. It's also any kind of activity that might warrant a call to the police. This is part of the culture of Gypsy communities keeping their business to themselves. An outreach and resettlement worker for a domestic violence charity in the UK explained why it's rare for Gypsy and traveler women to call the police for help. Bernie O'Rourke explained you would be seen as a grass and disowned by the whole community. This attitude goes across the whole gamut of behavior, so any Gypsy woman would know it was against the rules to get the police involved in any dispute on site. Do all the cleaning. We've seen how a woman becomes her husband's property in marriage and how she's expected to do all the housework. But it's not just wedlock that starts this way of life. It's a woman's role to cook and clean even before she becomes a wife. On the UK show Gypsy Kids Our Secret World, viewers were shown the inequality within the community. On one episode, the kids on the show were filmed talking about who did the cleaning, and they revealed that it would be completely shameful for a boy to be caught doing any sort of housework. From a very young age, girls are taught that they are to cook, clean, and serve the boys in their family. This provides training for their roles as wives and the expectation that they will serve their husbands. Observe rules around cleanliness. Hygiene is very important in Gypsy culture. As we've seen, this tends to fall on the female members of the community. As women are in charge of cleaning, they have a whole lot of rules to follow. These include not sharing any cutlery, crockery, or cups with anyone else, not even your spouse, and washing all items in running water before soaking them in a separate bowl of boiling water, and then washing them again. Men's and women's clothes are washed in separate bowls. As the upper body is viewed as clean and the lower body is viewed as dirty, clothes from each of those two parts are washed separately from each other. Underwear is also washed separately. Don't get a job. As the woman is in charge of the kids and the home, she isn't the one who goes out to work. That's considered a man's role. A study in the UK about gendered employment in the Gypsy and traveler community found that over 2/3 of women studied weren't in paid work. However, almost all of the women studied were engaged in family caring. This might be changing with younger generations, though. There was some evidence of women encouraging their daughters to consider employment and training options. However, attitudes towards married women working did still continue to make it difficult for some women to find paid work. Take pride in your possessions. As their home is their whole world, Gypsy women take a lot of pride in their homes. And that's not only the cleanliness of it, but also everything that's inside it. Their crockery is often handed down from mother to daughter on marriage, so fancy china tea sets aren't uncommon. Gypsy girls are also encouraged to take pride in their appearance to help snag a man. But this is in quite a surprising way. Dress provocatively. This is one of the most confusing rules that women have to follow in Gypsy culture. Although their behavior should be pure and chaste, they're expected to dress provocatively. This is so that they can attract men and snag a husband. The women that feature on shows like My Big Fat American Gypsy Wedding exemplify this way of dressing, and some of the breakout stars from that show particularly stand out, specifically Nettie Stanley from Gypsy Sisters. She starred in the TLC series alongside Melly, Kayla, and Laura after footage of their no-holds-barred wedding brawl went viral. You only need to take one look at Nettie's outfits to get an understanding of this style of dressing. Look after the kids. In this day and age, many men are stay-at-home dads while the moms go out to work, but that certainly doesn't happen in the Gypsy community. If you're a mother, you can bet that you'll be the one looking after the kids all the time. There simply isn't the flexibility of opinion on how a family should behave for you to do otherwise. Women have to observe rules about their role as a wife and mother. Some would consider these sorts of gender-based stereotypical roles to be old-fashioned and even sexist, but it's just the way of life for many Gypsy communities, and women don't necessarily have much choice about how they spend their life. Observe rules around childbirth. We're finishing up with some of the most surprising rules that Gypsy women have to follow, and these are surrounding giving birth. When a woman gives birth, she isn't allowed any physical contact with outsiders. She will not sleep with her husband until the baby is christened. During this period, she can only wash in holy water. There is the upside that the new mother must not cook or clean. So this is the only time when the men take over these sorts of housework tasks that are usually assigned to women. It's also fascinating, isn't it? Which of these rules is the most shocking? Let us know in the comments, and please give this video a big thumbs up. Thanks for watching!